Hello and welcome to the Green Thumb Lecture Series. My name is John Schaefer. I'm with the Harris County Public Library, and today we are digging deep into the art of gardening in extreme weather, something that's very important here in the Harris County area. Whether you're battling scorching heat, unexpected cold snaps, or drought conditions, we've got the tips and tricks and expert advice that you need to keep your garden thriving. We are thrilled to be joined by a distinguished member of the Harris County Masters Gardeners Association, who will share his expertise on gardening for extreme weather. And of course, our lecture series takes place online every month, the third Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m., which is right now. So mark your calendars for future presentations. That said, this is the last presentation for 2024. We always take off the last 2 months for the holidays, but we will be back in January, and we'll talk more about some of our upcoming schedule for that. A couple of housekeeping items. We love questions. So please, as you are watching our presentation, please type your questions into Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching this, and we will have master gardeners who are monitoring the chat, and they will answer questions with links and expert advice as we go. And we will also, at the end of the program, I will relay all those questions to our presenters, so we will have a chance to hear what the presenter has to say about those things. As I mentioned, 2025 will be our next show. It's going to be January 21st, 2025. We have got a lot of really cool programs coming up in 2025 for the Master Gardeners Green Thumb. I am very excited. Kicking things off on the 21st will be Genoa Friendship Gardens. We talk about them a lot here. I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about the Genoa Friendship Gardens, and we will dive deep into that in January. And if you are going to ever be if you ever want to know a little bit about the Master Gardener, there we go. Had a little mishap there, technical mishap for the first time. Let me introduce Robin, who is here right now. He's a physician's assistant, or was a physician's assistant, with a master's degree from the Nebraska Medical Center, Omaha, Nebraska. He retired from MD Anderson Cancer Center after a 20-year career in pain management. Although his career was extremely rewarding, he found that he was burned out. But Robin found healing in gardening with plants that are native to the greater Houston area. So, and I can blame the technical difficulties we just had on the fact that this is our very first broadcast that is international in its origin. You are not even in America right now. You are nice enough to break up your vacation. Would you mind telling everybody where you are right now?
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm Robin Kendrick Yates, Master Gardener, Harris County, and I am in Slovenia, the capital, Ljubljana.
Well, there you go. See, this is a first. We're coming all the way in. So all the information on Harris County you need from Slovenia. No, you are just kidding. We'll tell you what. I know we're gonna have a lot of questions. We got a lot to go over, so let's go ahead and get things going. I'll let you take over from here, Robin, and we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great. Thank you, John. Hi, welcome, everyone, to our October edition of the Green Thumb Lecture Series. I hope you'll enjoy our time together and come away with an idea or two that may aid you in being more successful in your garden and yard, and possibly keep you safe as well. Thank you to my Master Gardener colleagues who will be putting helpful links in the chat as we go along. Be sure to put your questions in the chat, and we will answer them as we go and have a time to answer them at the end. Now, I have the privilege of announcing next year's schedule for the Green Thumb series. As John mentioned, I actually will be talking on Genoa Friendship Gardens, the history of the demonstration garden, January 13th and 21st. So that lineup for next year looks enjoyable, and it's going to be informative. And so be sure and come back and join us then. Today's topic is well covered in our recent edition of Harris County Master Gardeners Urban Dirt newsletter. You can find that online, the Harris County Master Gardeners website. And this particular edition, September, October, has several articles that focus on this very topic, gardening here in the Gulf Coast area with weather extremes. First, Yesterday was International Indigenous Peoples Day. I would like to acknowledge the Native people who inhabited this land that we call Southeast Texas for thousands of years sustainably. The Ekokisa, Karankawa, and others were displaced. Many lost their lives, their land, as well as their culture. I would like to honor them by opening the discussion on facing wrongs in the past and moving toward healing and restoration in the here and now. This International World's Indigenous Peoples Day focus was protecting the rights of Indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation and initial contact. So on to our topic of gardening with weather extremes. What we're going to do is we'll discuss what different weather extremes that we face in our area. Then we'll describe its effects on gardening. Then we'll talk about how to deal with the extreme weather. And I hope you'll come away with a few things that you can add to your cultural practices for a more resilient gardening to weather the extremes that we face. So first of all, what is normal or usual? Well, here in Southeast Texas, we can essentially grow most of the year. A successful gardener will choose the right plant for their location and provide the conditions for healthy growth of her or his plants with increasingly unpredictable weather. Optimal growing is between 60 and 80 degrees for many plants. And so I like to use what I call the Goldilocks and the rule of twos. Remember the porridge and the bed and Goldilocks and the three bears? Well, our weather is often too cold, too hot, too wet, too dry, too windy, too calm. But our plants really want it just right. And so we often find we're dealing with temperature extremes, heat versus frost and freeze, rainfall extremes, flood versus drought. And then wind will also be extreme. High wind with hurricanes, tornadoes, blue northers, and also calm weather when there's no wind. And how does that affect pollination and fungal disease? The USDA's plant hardiness zone map is the standard for gardeners and growers to determine which plants are most likely to survive the coldest winter temperatures in their location. It takes the average of the last 30 years and puts that on a zone. The 2023 map is 2.5 degrees warmer than the 2012 map. And how does that affect us here in Southeast Texas? You may remember that we used to be in the 9A and 8B zones. Well, now we're in the 9A and 9B. Basically has migrated, the warmer temperatures have moved up 1 to 1.5 zones in many areas. Yet that only deals with the coldest temperature. What we find here in Southeast Texas is we're often dealing with heat. And this map that I'm showing you now is the U.S. Horticulture Society. It gives the number of days per year when the temperature is 86 degrees or higher. You can see that we're in zone 9, and that means we have 120 to 150 days above 86 degrees. And that's a critical threshold for plant physiology, since most plants begin to suffer stress at that level. So let's talk about some extremes. What's too cold? What is frost? Frost is frozen water vapor on the surface of a plant, usually of a short duration. It happens during the night as the temperatures dip and then thaws as the day warms up. A freeze, however, is a more extended period of time below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, where the water inside the plant freezes, rupturing the plant cell walls, damaging the plant. Now, these are pictures of my front yard last winter when we had a frost. You can see that I have replaced the turf with frog fruit, and the frog fruit has frost on it. I had to be quick because this went away. As soon as the sun came out, it melted the frost. But you can see my frog fruit did well, and many of the neighbors, St. Augustine was dormant at this time. I was kind of proud of that. So what can you do? So culturally, You can add these things to your garden routine. Plant selection. Plant native plants. Plant earth-kind plants. Our website is available here, and we'll be putting it in the link for selecting plants that do well here in our area. Also, deep, infrequent watering. That encourages deep root growth, and I'll show you the benefit for deep roots in just a moment. Also, well-draining soil. This is important to keep this as something that's conducive for your plant growth. Also, mulching throughout the year, adding 2 to 4 inches of mulch throughout the year, and you'll see how that's going to help as we go on. Also, know the garden zones, the microclimates in your yard. The soil can be different from one area to another. The elevation, there can be rising and lowering. Cold temperatures tend to go down, and so lower spots will have more likely to freeze and to freeze longer. Also, location. What area is this, north, south, east, or west? How much sun exposure? How much wind? Is there tree canopy? Are there other buildings obstructing? And one thing culturally that I'd like to mention is to avoid the temptation for fall cleanup. Things begin to go dormant, and we tend to want to start pruning and fertilizing. But if you do those things, you actually be stimulating the plant to grow. And if you do that before it's going to freeze or have a frost, you're going to actually put the plant at risk for a more lethal event. So the greater Houston area used to be coastal tallgrass prairie, and the root system extending deep into the soil. Approximately 3/4 of the plant's life is below the ground. If you look at those roots, they're measured in feet, not in inches. Some of them are over 10 feet deep. With added natural mulch, these plants are better able to withstand the extremes of temperature and moisture during cold spells, protected from freezing. Note the shallow root system over here. If you can see my cursor on the left-hand side, this is turf grass. Okay, this is your turf grass and its shallow root system. How susceptible are those roots to freezing? So the idea now is to develop a cold protection plan. How to protect my plants when a frost is coming. Firstly, water the plants well before a cold event. That helps to relieve any drought stress, because if they're already stressed by drought and then a frost comes, your plants are more susceptible to damage. It also provides a heat sink. Adding that water to the soil helps the soil to retain its warmth, the energy. And then cover tender plants with row covers or frost cloth. This protects the plant surfaces, also retains the soil warmth. And make sure that you tuck it down to the surface of the soil so that the cold air does not slip underneath it and cause damage to your plants. And this is an example of several different frost covers. Okay, this is a busy slide, but there's a lot here, so bear with me. So in order to prevent damage, something that you can do throughout the year, as we mentioned, is to mulch. Mulch well and mulch throughout the year. I also recommend chop and drop. When I'm doing my deadheading and my pruning, I often let the plant's debris fall to the surface of the soil and let that become mulch that then decomposes and goes back into the soil. That's a circular economy. That insulates the roots. Don't put it up against the stem or up against the bark of the tree. You keep it away from that. Avoid a mulch volcano. The types of mulch that I recommend are native hardwood, compost, hay, leaves, pine needles, other organic matter. No dyes or treated wood. Also, cover the tender plants. Protect the little ones. Right, you can use frost cloth, leaves. You can use anything. You don't have to buy something expensive. You can reuse different old pots, garbage cans, blankets. Just be sure that the plastic sheeting is not used because it can collect the water vapor. And if you're putting something over the plants, be sure there's support to protect the plants themselves. You can also add a heat source underneath your frost cover or your pot, whatever you cover your plants with. C9 Christmas lights are helpful. mechanics lights, and also from one of the references I'll be showing you at the end, a 5-gallon bucket full of water. That underneath the frost collector will also absorb a lot of energy and protect the plant, the water in the plant, from freezing. It will absorb the energy instead. And then, last but not least, for things in containers, you can move those babies and protect them from the cold. One thing I wanted to say, this is the time of year when leaves were supposed to start falling. So I want to leave a message with leave the leaves, y'all. 30% of Texas landfill is yard waste that can be reused. So leaves are a great natural mulch. Instead of bagging them up and sending them up to the landfill, run your mower over them and use them in your beds or compost them. What this does is it helps to keep the roots warm in winter, cool in the summer. It retains moisture, decreasing watering needs. It prevents weeds, and it nourishes the soil. And it's a decreased need for landfills, which we're running out of space for the landfills. So I consider this a win-win. So leave the leaves, y'all. And this is an example of what I do with my leaves. And this is my grand dog sniffing, enjoying the leaves. This is a demonstration garden, Genoa Friendship, we're going to be talking about in January. This is the native plant bed, and I started it by mulching over the first summer leaves. That's all I used to compost and to establish the first basis for the soil. And so preventing cold weather damage, mulch is essential. It can be an extra blanket of insurance. You can mulch it deeply around the base of plants. For fruit trees, cover the graft point. Okay, so you want to make sure that that tree that you're wanting survives, so cover the graft point. And then you can use bags of leaves as insulation around plants or shrubs, and even as a windbreak, and to make a temporary microclimate. What you're basically trying to do is extend the season so that your plants survive the cold spell. And then after the cold is over, once the temperature is above 32 degrees, remove the coverings and wait. This is often the hard part, and wait some more. Assess the damage. Prune only mushy, soft plant material. That's material that the cell wall was destroyed by the freeze. Water it normally, but don't fertilize until there's new growth. Woody plants, if you want to see if it's viable, you can scrape a little bit away to see if it's green, but most of all, be patient. Too much too soon often means more damage. The cleanup will come after the risk of another freeze has passed. The most common gardening error is to prune too soon. And this is one of the resources of how to deal with frost and freezes in your garden. We'll make this available to you, as well as learning to live with ugly. A lot of the perspective that I'm trying to learn is to change my perspective on what I want my garden to look like. Sometimes I have to be willing to go along with what nature is doing. And going along with after a freeze requires patience. So, too much wind. Okay, we are familiar with this, right? Recently we had Hurricane Beryl. We've had Ike in the past, which was predominantly a windstorm. We have tornadoes. In May, we had derecho. We have thunderstorms. In the winter, we have blue northers. What does wind do to plants? It can break off branches, okay? It can tear off flowers and fruit, uprooting trees and shrubs, particularly in wet soil. And the wind, prolonged wind, can pull moisture from the foliage as well as from the soil. Primarily, wind worsens the effect of all the other weather events: freeze, heat, drought, and flood. This is an example of a tree falling on a house. I had a good friend, one of our master gardener friends. Her house was destroyed during the derecho in May due to this type of damage. And you see, wind can destroy otherwise good, healthy environment. This was in my neighborhood after Beryl. It took, I think, 5 weeks before folks figured out what to do with that debris. I would like to invite you to the Genoa Friendship Garden. We have a demonstration bed, and it's a hugelkultur bed. And I'll explain that to you when you come, or if you want me to come back and talk about it. It's how to make a raised bed out of storm debris. It's really fascinating. Okay, so wind, culturally, what can you do? Well, we can select wind-resistant trees. This resource that I have highlighted at the bottom will take you to an article by the University of Florida where they actually can show you which trees are more wind-resistant. Then also for trees that are young, staking is important, can help keep them upright during the wind. But primarily what I learned through Beryl was how important it is to prune, trim, and thin trees on a regular basis. Have an arborist come by and take care of your trees annually. That can help prevent damage later to your buildings or to your plants as well. You can also have a barrier or a windbreak. Row cover can help to tend your plants or seedlings. And again, things are in containers, you can move those around. Also, this is something I came up in my research, was what happens when there's no wind? Can it be too calm? Well, adequate airflow is essential for enhanced gas exchange and photosynthesis. It prevents fungal and bacterial infection. It strengthens plant structure. It also improves nutrient absorption through the roots. It increases transpiration and water uptake, as well as enhanced pollination. So what can we do to make sure there's enough proper adequate airflow? Proper plant spacing is important. Also facilitate airflow by removing obstacles. We need to make sure that we have things set up to utilize the prevailing wind. So also rain and flood, too much water. We average around 50 inches of rain a year. It would be nice if it came in weekly doses of 1 inch a week, right? Well, that's not going to happen. We just don't have rain. We have rain events. Days with multiple inches of rain causing flash flooding are all too common here in Southeast Texas. When it rains, I like to recommend looking, where does the water go? Watch what happens. Consider how to harvest the rain when it comes. You can not only save water for dry times, but you help mitigate flooding by harvesting the rain, by building swales, designing swales or ponds, rain gardens, capturing your rain, harvesting it with rain barrels, or as I mentioned, hugelkultur also is a good way to store rain. Also, drainage. Raised beds are a great option for us here in Houston. Also building channels or French drains, permeable paving for our driveway. Also planting native prairie trees, grasses, flowers, and ground cover. And why do I say that? Well, going back to this diagram by Dr. Natura, we see that the roots of the native plants help nature deal with flooding. Nature does it by spreading it out, slowing it down, and soaking it in. Note again the depth of those root systems. Well, the turf grass is over here again, just a few inches deep. Which root system is going to help with the rain events that we have? This is a resource on building rain gardens. It's another option to do. And so what to do when there's too much water? Damage tender plants. It can do that by changing the healthy soil, which is 25% air and 25% water. It can saturate it and basically be 50% water. Well, that's not helpful to the plants. Too much rain causes topsoil erosion. That's another problem that we have. It washes away the young plants and seedlings, washes away our mulch, washes away nutrients, and then it creates an environment for diseases, fungal and bacterial. And so here's a couple of pictures of what too much water does to the plants. So what to do in the aftermath? Try not to walk on the soil near plants and shrubs. That causes compaction. Remove the mulch and allow the soil to dry. Inspect your plants for damage. Trim and prune damaged plant material. Make sure it's dry. And then use an organic fertilizer to help replenish any leached away nutrients, and watch again for fungal disease and bacterial diseases. The best fertilizer or weed killer for your garden is your shadow. Your presence there is going to be the best thing that you can do for your plants. So remove any debris after a flood, dig ditches to direct the water away, gently loosen up the soil, allow it to improve the oxygenation, nutrient supply. Inspect the plants, check them, see how they're doing, and remove, discard contaminated material. And again, monitor your plants, watch them for signs of stress. Also, wind, hurricanes, and tropical storms. We are well acquainted with these. Many of us remember our childhoods by the hurricanes we experienced while growing up in this area. And this is a picture of Hurricane Harvey and the flooding that we encountered. Well, hurricanes and tropical storms, safety is number one. These are the worst of rain and wind simultaneously. Extreme conditions that can destroy gardens and so much more. All the previous prevention and recovery steps apply. This is one thing I wanted to get to. Yesterday, Intercontinental Airport had a record temperature for October 14th by 7 degrees. 2023 was the hottest year on record in Houston. We had 45 days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Their heat-related illnesses and fatalities are increasing. In 2023, there were over 2,000 heat-related fatalities in our country. So typically in our area, from April through October, the highs are often above 90 degrees. So what do we learn from that? Gardening before 9 a.m. and after 7:30 p.m. From May through October. Otherwise, it's too hot. We find that ideal temperatures for gardening, we have two ideal periods from mid-February to mid-April and mid-October-ish to mid-December. It's just right. Also, the heat. Studies are showing that it affects us in many ways. It affects our thinking and our mood. And just while I was writing this presentation, developing it, the Northeast was going through a heat wave. So I wanted to spend a few moments reminding us of what are the signs of heat exhaustion. When the heat index and what I'm going to show you about the wet bulb global temperature is high, and you develop these symptoms, headache, nausea, dizziness, weakness, irritability, thirst. I don't know about y'all, but that's an average day for me. I can experience those at any time. But what I want us to point out is when the heat is up and we're experiencing these, then we need to take action to take care of ourselves. When we're over 65, as I am, our thirst reflex has decreased. And so we're not going to notice that actually I'm dehydrated. I'm not going to feel thirsty. So we have to be more mindful as my urine becoming dark, I'm feeling dizzy or lightheaded, muscle cramping or weakness. Is my skin dry? Am I feeling fatigued or headache? Again, this is an average day for me in the garden. When the heat is up, and we'll talk about how to tell that, we need to be aware. So most of us are aware of the heat index. It's a measure of the heat temperature, the ambient temperature, combined with the humidity. And most of us are pretty good at following that. I wanted to show you a couple of things. These are some different websites that can show you what is the temperature risk, the heat risk in our area, and you can monitor that throughout the day. And it's a part of planning for our gardening. And so here's something that I became aware of in my research was that many medications that we take, I'm actually taking 3 different medicines on these classes that actually decrease our body's ability to cool down. And so talk to your doctor. If you're like myself, 65 and over, or if you're young, you're more susceptible to heat-related illness. And these are some helpful websites. What I'd like to teach you is something I learned this last summer. is called the wet bulb global temperature. Eric Berger, meteorologist with Space City Weather, on June 2024, describes the wet bulb temperature as this. It's quite simply a measure of how the heat affects you. It factors in temperature, 3 different temperatures: ambient, evaporative, and radiant readings, humidity, wind speed, sun angle, and cloud cover. It factors all those in together, and it tells us how long we can be out in the heat. And if you look at this scale that I've got here on the right-hand side, you can see that when the wet bulb global temperature is in this range, 80 to 85, you need to be outside no more than 45 minutes per hour. And as it goes on down, you spend more time in the shade or AC. Remember this as we look at the next slide. Now, I want you to look at this. This is okay. This is elevated risk, the light green. Okay, that means we can only be outdoors maximum of 45 minutes per hour. Here in the yellow area, it's moderate, and we can only be outdoors 30 minutes per hour. Now we're up into the extreme high and extreme range, 20 minutes per hour and 15 minutes per hour. That means up here, 45 minutes per hour at least, you're in the AC or you're in the shade. How many of us are doing that out in the summer in the sun? This can give us some wisdom to help protect ourselves from harm. So what do we learn from this? Stay inside. When the extreme heat is up, let it be. Also, when you're gardening, garden together. Watch out for each other, because we'll often not notice some of these symptoms or signs. Somebody else will notice it and can help us, encourage us to get into the AC. Also, gardening before 9 a.m. or after 7:30 p.m. And then take frequent breaks in the shade, air conditioning. I've had gardening friends bring ice towels, and we put those over our neck while we're cooling down in the shade. Wear proper clothing. I wear rash guards all year long, and it turns out the rash guards keep my skin from heating up from being exposed to the sun. And then paying attention to hydration. So what do we do for the garden now that we've taken care of the gardener? Again, plant selection. Plant with native plants. Those plants are champions. They've survived. They know how to survive here. Texas superstar plants, which we have through Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. Also babying your plants until they're established. Also mulching insulates the roots. It does all the things, but also it prevents when our Houston clay soil dries up and it cracks. Those cracks can expose the roots to heat. Mulching protects the roots from that hot air. Also watering deep and less frequently with a drip cycle or cycle soak. Also, how to protect your trees. This website will show you how to protect your tree during the drought. We have to take care of our trees, or we have lost many of them in the last several summers. Also, rain harvesting. One thing that I learned was that through the hot part of the year, June through August, we can have evaporation of up to 6 inches per month, losing moisture. That's pretty significant. So what do we do with drought? Well, in the 1950s, there was a 7-year drought, and as a result of that, the Texas Water Development Board formed. We've also seen drought in 2010 and 11 up through 2015 was an extended period. And then last year, 2023, was quite a drought for much of Texas. A&M has done some studies in showing that it's going to be dry, and we need to be prepared for this. And this was at the end of last summer, that there was no rain in sight. So for drought, the same cultural recommendations as for extreme heat. Mulch, natural hardwood mulch or leaves, 2 to 4 inches. Rain catchment, rainwater harvesting, rain gardens, plant selection, learning how much water is this plant going to require before I purchase it and bring it to my yard. And then thinking about the climate. Plants from northern Mexico I need to be looking a little further south for plants that are adapted to the climate that's developing here. And then design for some shade for shallow rooted plants so that they don't spend 8 hours a day in the Texas sun. Understory plants can also be a layer of a landscaping that we tend to neglect, but it can add shade and help decrease evaporation. Then we've got a list of resources. Besides the links that my friends have been sharing with you, I'd like to bring your attention to a garden book for Houston and the Texas Gulf Coast. It's an excellent resource. And also Bob Randall's Year-Round Food Gardening for Houston and Southeast Texas is a wonderful resource that I use. I learned a lot from that I've been talking to you about today. All right. And those are my birthday kittens. And do we have any questions?
Well, we want to hear more about the kittens, clearly, more than anything else. No. Yes, we have questions. Hang on one second here. So,
yes.
So much great information. Let's back up. I guess recently, what you just mentioned, we were talking about the droughts. Now, obviously, in the Harris County area, we will have these rain events like we've had recently where, the last few months where you'll have, crazy amounts of rain, and you'll start to think, how can we ever then have a drought again? Can't we save some of that water? Isn't that water going to be, don't they just, doesn't that go in the lake and then it's for, the rest of the year? Can you, I know it's kind of a big topic, but can you talk about how that's not necessarily one big rain event is not the cure for a drought from the previous 2 years?
That's correct. And a lot of the reason is because we've developed the land. We've put down impervious surfaces. We put buildings, parking lots, pavement, sidewalks, streets, and there's no place for the water to go. That's why you see us widening the bayous. We channelize it. We make them wider, deeper, and straighter to tell that water to get out because we don't like flooding of our streets, right? And so we make the problem by all these impervious surfaces. That's why I advocate for people to advocate for the green spaces. Anytime we take an area and we make it into a green space, we are actually helping ourselves as well as helping nature. And so that is a problem. We need to retain more of that moisture, and we don't do it by paving and impervious surfaces.
Yeah. That kind of goes along with this next comment we had on Facebook. Somebody mentioned, in Harris County, there was a lot of news recently, I guess in the last months, about A-Leaf, I think was the A-Leaf area was designed as like the hottest area in one of the hottest areas in Harris County. And they realized there's no trees. They've cut all, and if you drive through A-Leaf, you'll see that it's all concrete and houses and there's no shade. And so you get this heat zone. So I guess kind of a two thing. One is what can we do to maybe, obviously we need to be planting more trees, but I wanted to get your thoughts on that as far as things that we can actually do ourselves to kind of combat this climate change difference.
Absolutely. So anything that we can do. I'm a volunteer with Trees for Houston. In fact, as soon as I arrive home, I'm going to have a tree giveaway in my neighborhood with Trees for Houston. And that's how we can help alleviate the heat island effect that you talk about there in A-Leaf. There have been some studies. Jaime Gonzalez with Nature Conservancy has done a lot of research along these lines. And planting trees in those areas that we have neglected is a great step forward. So yes, absolutely. Anything that we can do to plant native plants in areas that are right now neglected, we can restore nature and bring green spaces back. In fact, my title for the next Green Thumb lecture, which is going to be in January, about
January 21st, I think.
Yeah, January, right, 21st, is on the Genoa Friendship Garden. My title for that is Unpaving a Parking Lot. It used to be a parking lot, and so I'm going to be talking about what we've done there as master gardeners to actually take a parking lot and unpave it.
Got it.
Right? So taking something and making a green space, we can do this in our own yards.
Well, and it seems like now this is, if there's ever been a perfect time, now it is with the derecho and with Hurricane Beryl. Just in my neighborhood, the amount of trees that came down, and I'm talking big trees that we all saw the pictures. there's a lot of space for trees now that we didn't think so, and maybe choosing the appropriate tree and choosing the placement. I know maybe you can't always plant a tree right where the one you had was broken off, but close by you can maybe the placement. There's a science. I mean, there's not to say a science to that. I mean, you definitely want to get in there, but there's a lot of thought you should put into what kind of tree, where that tree should be planted.
Absolutely. There's some great resources, and we talk about that. I have a talk that Stephanie Gray put together following Hurricane Beryl on how to protect our trees and how to plant and all of that thought that goes into it. So there's a lot of resources available to help us. That one article that I brought up from University of Florida, it's a great article on wind-resistant trees, and so it could help with tree selection. And then we talk about how to select and then how to prune a tree to help it grow so it's healthy and not likely to collapse during a storm.
Absolutely. My mom, we were really lucky. My mom lived in the Spring area, or lives in the Spring area, and had just about 3 weeks prior, because one tree had died, had an arborist come out and clean out, do a bunch of, and it was one of those things at the time. She was like, man, it cost a little bit of money. There was, but then after the hurricane hit, and all of a sudden they looked around, it was like, who knows? I mean, losing a tree or paying an arborist to, trim a tree, a whole lot cheaper than replacing the wing of your house or your
Absolutely. House. What I tell people is that Hurricane Beryl came through and did our pruning for us. We haven't been pruning, and it did it for us. Okay, but an arborist actually came through last winter. I think it was in February or March. I had an arborist take care of my beautiful ash trees in our backyard. Mm-hmm. And I watched them when Beryl came through at 4 a.m. that Monday morning. I watched those trees, and they looked like rubber bands.
Wow.
They were bouncing around, and I was really concerned for them, but I only lost one branch because the arborist had taken care of all of that beforehand. So exactly. A lot of prevention can be done, and getting a certified arborist to look at our trees and care for them is an essential part of regular maintenance.
Absolutely. Real quick, we got a few more questions, but you'll notice there's a link for the survey in the comments section. You might want to cut and paste that. We definitely want everybody to let us know what you're thinking of the program. Please take the survey. It really helps out the Master Gardeners, and it helps out us as well. So please don't hesitate to do that. Talking about hurricanes, one last question on that. With all that debris, I had never even heard this term before, and I saw a hugel bed. I know you're going to talk a lot more about that another, but can you just briefly, where could someone find some information on that if they still happen to have a lot of debris out in their backyard, or what is? Tell me more about
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's called hugel culture. It's a German term, okay, and it just basically means mound culture or mound garden bed. And what you're doing is you're basically using the big branches and trunks of trees, those pieces, you pile them up together, and then smaller and smaller pieces, and then you're putting organic material, grass clippings, leaves, compost, and then soil. You build that all up together, and you let it settle in and pack together and water it. And as you're building it, when you finish, you have a mound, and then you've got a raised bed. It's organic material, and that is such a wonderful water sink. It takes a lot of water. It absorbs a lot of water, so much so that when it is mature, you don't have to water it, and it can help your plants make it through dry spells, not needing water because there's so much held down in those logs that are down deep within it's a hugel culture is the name of it. I have a demonstration bed at the Genoa Friendship Garden. We've just been working on this, and I used debris from my neighbors from Beryl to build this. And so it's really a wonderful thing. It's something that we can learn to use the debris from our own yards, our own trees, and we can build our own raised beds. And so it's free. Right. And we can grow vegetables on it. We can grow flowers, whatever we want. It's a wonderful concept, and it's way underutilized. I learned about this during my compost advanced training, and I just fell in love with the idea. And some of the other interns caught my my fever about this, and so we've been working on it. And I'm excited to get back because they're just going to have planted it with clover, and that's the first cover crop.
Okay.
And so that's going to provide nitrogen in that soil so that in the spring, then we will be able to plant vegetables and herbs and other things. So I'm really excited about
that.
Yes.
That is really cool. I'm anxious. I'm glad you guys are doing that. And I mean, talk about the way we learn things, how they go. Okay. Let me get other questions. Let's see. I want to make sure we get everything we covered here. You're talking about going back to mulching. I obviously we mulch during the summer, and the big reason is to keep the moisture, keep the moisture in. You're saying mulch year round, and I hadn't really ever thought about that. But is that? I mean, obviously keeps the heat. I guess keeps the heat in. And do you recommend? Is that the best time to use the natural, like the leaves that they fall, let them lay where they fall, and kind of a.
Yes. A lot of what we can do is we can learn from nature and follow what nature does.
What does nature know? I mean,
it's been around for a while, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what I recommend is year-round mulching, because the mulch, if you're placing organic mulch there, it's going to decay, it's going to decompose and become soil, and so it's going to collapse. And so over time, even just over a few months, it's going to go down. And so you need to replenish that. And so I've been listening to other master gardeners, other folks talk about mulching. And basically the best thing to do is if you have mulch, put it down. And so that's why I do chop and drop. I let the plants fall right back where they go. That's what nature does. And so I save a lot of money by not having to buy fertilizer, by letting the plants just go back into the soil, and that creates its own mulch.
If you don't, have your own, if you don't have a lawnmower or whatever, obviously you can just let stuff go. But I'm thinking in terms of like a magnolia tree, like when it drops those big, hard those leaves, and you'd have to have a lawnmower to kind of chop those up, right? I mean, that's
absolutely. Yeah. That's what I recommend, is taking a mower over the leaves, and that speeds up the decomposition process, and it makes them lay down easier in your beds and not be blown around quite so much. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if we have any more. Okay, that Facebook is a good idea to put down the compost along through I'm looking at other questions, see if there's anything else we missed here. It's a lot of good questions on hugelkultur. I know that's going to be a popular show. Gosh, Robin, I think. Oh, one last thing. So we're in zone 9 right now. We're in zone 9, and obviously we want to plant native plants because things are warming up. Is it changing some of the plants we should be planting? Are there new species of plants that are way more or that more adept to the climate that we live in now that's changing? Is that something?
Research is ongoing as far as which plants to plant, like trees. We're planting trees not for ourselves, but for our children and our grandchildren. Well, what trees should we be planting for 30 years from now? And so Jaime Gonzalez was talking to the master gardeners about this in the spring. And like he said, we lost a lot of magnolias in 2023. We just had a huge die-off on magnolias. So as much as I love the southern magnolia, planting that for now, for the next generation, maybe not so much. Maybe focus on trees that are hardier in the climate just to the south of us. That's why I said, looking back to northern Mexico, some of those plants are the plants that we probably should be going toward. So over time, we'll basically be learning what will survive and what we have the resources, because we can't bring in everything and expect to water it, because water is a precious resource, and it's going to become more so over time as Texas grows in population. We're already having places with water shortages, so we need to think about these things.
Yeah. One quick question that came in. Someone asked, this is from Alicia on Facebook, says, is it a good idea to put down compost along with mulching throughout the year?
Absolutely. Compost is basically mulch that has decomposed further. And so compost is great. I love compost, and I think it's a great way to decrease the amount of synthetic fertilizers that we use, and it helps to nourish the soil. When you look at the soil food web and you consider how many billions of organisms are in healthy soil, feeding that and the compost is a great addition to that. So absolutely.
Very good. Thank you for the question, Alicia. Well, gosh, Robin, thank you so much. I want to point out everything that this is the Harris County Master Gardeners. We don't mention it a lot, but check out their website. You guys have an amazing website with so much resources and information. Please check that out. The Harris County Master Gardeners Association, the website. Definitely something you want to look at. So you're going to be doing our January presentation, so we get to see you again in January. That's right. Very exciting. Are you going to be in Slovenia still, or will you be back in Texas? Where are we?
I'll be back in Harris County then. Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Good.
And I'd love to have folks come visit us at the Friendship Garden. You don't have to wait till then, but I'll be highlighting the hugelkultur in that talk, just because that's a pet project of mine, and I get to do the talk, so I get to talk about it. That'll be a part of it. But I'd love to show that to folks. And we have many different areas. We have xeriscaping, we have rose gardening, we have vegetable gardening. We have a vast array of different gardens, and a lot of master gardeners with a lot of experience that are just more than happy to share what they're learning with folks.
Yeah, the work you guys do is amazing, and it's just, we're so glad to have you here and do this program. So, tell you what, everybody. So with that, we'll say we will see you next year in 2025. We got a lot of surprises and a lot of really cool stuff coming up next year, and I saw the schedule. You are going to love everything, and you're going to want to make sure you mark this down on your calendars. So, Robin, with that, I will say thank you so very much for joining us from Slovenia and for talking. And we will see everybody again next year. All right.
Thank you, John. It's a blast. Thank you so much.